Jawad, an Iraqi American teen, was accused of being a terrorist by a racist teacher because she thought he brought a bomb. Turns out it was actually just a jetpack prop. Jawad got arrested, and when he returned, he was bullied since then, being called Bomb Boy. About 3 weeks later, he was murdered. Sophia is a young journalist in a private school who found Jawad's body. After finding the body, she and her family started getting threats because they were Muslim, and someone hacked into their school website, where she is the main editor, and says extremely racist stuff under the name Ghost Skin. Her principal believes that she is the one doing this, but he has it out for her since she published a blog post about the school is not all that good. Okay, so the first question is, the first part of the book. So in our book, there was a kid named Jawad, and he was experiencing racist things happening to him at school. How does a school administrator address racism?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that somebody in my position would do is, we would put into place policies, right, to prevent this sort of stuff from happening. So we have rules here at school. You guys have a school handbook. The handbook outlines what acceptable behavior is and what things are not allowed on school grounds, right? Second thing is you got to have consistent consequences when these things are brought to you, when they're experienced by somebody. So I think those two things are the main way that we deal with something like this. But also in addition, it's about building a school culture, right? Making sure that students know that everybody who walks through the doors is to be valued, regardless of what they look like or what their beliefs are.
Okay.
In a book, while Jawad's being bullied for being arrested for model jetpack, and he's being called bomb boy, and people saying like tick tick to him. And if this were to happen in our school, as an administrator, what do you do for the kid?
Yes, I think at this point, more so than, something being racist, he's also being harassed, okay? Making sure that we understand as a school that it's not just my job as an administrator to prevent things from like this happening, but it's everybody's job, right? So if you are a student and you're experiencing these things, bringing that to a school administrator so that they can deal with it, but also making sure that every other student knows that if they witness something happening, they also have a responsibility to prevent it from happening, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in the book, there was an unknown person named Ghostskin. He hacked into the main character Sophia's blog for the school newspaper, and her principal, Dr. Hardy, thought it might have been her. So if someone hacked into our school district, what would be the first thing you would do?
So the first thing that I would do is find somebody who has more expertise in this area than I do, right? I'm not going to be able to find a hacker. That's just not a skill set that I have. So Mr. Haynes, our director of technology, he'd be the first person that I would go to because he's going to have knowledge to be able to, handle a situation like this, but also investigate and try to figure out where it's coming from. The last thing that I would do is jump to conclusions about who did it, okay? If there are individuals who have access to the site, yes, I would call them in and ask them questions, right? Because is there a chance that it could be them? Sure. But I'm not going to assume that somebody is guilty right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
It's not guilty to assume it innocent.
It's innocent until proven guilty, right? Instead of the other way around, so.
In the story, Jawad's teacher thought he had brought a bomb, and when he came back to school, he got bullied and stuff. So what would you do if it looked like a student brought a weapon to school, and what would you do after you found out it was not a weapon?
Yeah, so it seems to me like, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong because you read the book and I didn't, but it sounds like the teacher also jumped to conclusions, right? Punished somebody before they had all the information about what was actually going on, what the person actually brought. So if it's me in this situation and a teacher brings this to me, I'm gonna make sure that I'm investigating first, doing the best that I can. Then if I feel like I need to get law enforcement involved, calling Chief Garretts and having, Chief come over to the school to help me investigate if it's something that I feel like is out of my scope, okay? Doesn't sound like that's what happened here. It sounds like the police were called immediately. and this got blown up into something bigger than it is, and then the kid was probably embarrassed, right? And it seemed to me like, so this jetpack prop, it was basically just a backpack, right?
Yeah, with
Yeah.
Coke bottles strapped to it.
Yeah. So, in that situation, the kid probably thought that he had created something that was pretty cool looking, right? And wanted to show it off, and then he ends up getting in trouble and being harassed. So if it looks like there's a student that brought a weapon to school, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try to make sure that the rest of you are safe, right? If we think there's a weapon involved. Getting that kid out of class, separating them from whatever we think the weapon might be. Okay, and then investigating, getting the police involved if we have to. If we find out it's not a weapon, okay, we're going to communicate that to the entire staff and have them relay that information to all the students. But we're also going to send a message to all the parents and say, hey, there was something that happened earlier, turned out to be just a toy. There's no threat to any of your students. We apologize for the inconvenience. Something of that nature. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That way we've communicated with all the stakeholders, right? All of you know that everything's okay. All the teachers know that everything's okay. All your parents know that everything's okay. That's typically how we handle things. That's the procedure we go through.
Now, my question is kind of like a continuation of that one.
Okay.
It's like, so he was, bullied because he was arrested by the cops for no reason, and he was called bomb boy, yada yada. That was all kind of out of his control. Because, So what would you do if somebody was getting bullied or harassed or something like that because something that happened out of their control that happened at school?
Yeah. Well, I think it sort of goes along with my answer from before, making sure that we're communicating to all the students that this was a false rumor, right? It was untrue. Second thing is, in addition to having policies about acceptable behavior, we also have policies on bullying, right? So if something like that is happening, if a student is being harassed, then we're going to follow that procedure, and there will be consequences to the students who are involved in perpetrating that bullying.
In the book, there is a teacher accused of being a racist. Have you ever had to deal with a problem with a teacher being racist, or if you haven't, what would you do in that situation?
I have dealt with situations like this where teachers are accused of being racist. Thankfully, in the situation that I was in, it ended up being a false accusation. It was a student who was upset about a grade that they got, okay, and they were looking to get revenge on that teacher. But in that situation, if I've got a student that's bringing that report to me, I'm going to investigate it. I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to the teacher. I'm going to ask for specific evidence from the student as well. I will talk with other teachers, who are around this person and may have witnessed some things, similar to what you would do almost in a police investigation, right? You need to talk to everybody involved, get witness statements, have everybody write everything down. If it turns out that this is true, if we have a teacher who's being racist towards some of our students in the school, then that would be cause for letting that person go, because I don't believe that they should be around our students if they're not going to treat everybody fairly.
If there was a problem in the school relating to a student having trauma, what would you do?
So we have, individuals that come into our building, whose sole job it is to help students in situations like that, right? Mrs. Etheridge, okay, and I believe the last class just went down and was talking with our school psychologist, right? So school social workers, school psychologists, our counselors, those individuals are employed by the school for specific reasons like this, right? To help kids deal with situations where, they've experienced trauma. And I don't know how much all of you know about trauma, but, if we're trying to get you to learn something and you've experienced trauma, your brain's not going to be able to process what it is that we're trying to have you learn, because it's so wrapped up in the trauma that you're experiencing, it shuts down the part of your brain that allows you to learn. So we need to make sure that you feel safe okay, that you have dealt with that trauma, okay, in an appropriate way before you're going to be able to do what it is we're asking you to do in this building, okay? There's something called trauma-informed instruction, which is basically running a school and keeping in mind that all individuals come to us with different perspectives and having dealt with different things, okay? And thinking about those things in situations where a student may be causing trouble, right, or acting out. What is the reason that they're acting out? Likely it's not something that they've experienced here, but it's something they've experienced outside the building. So keeping those things in mind and helping those students work through those issues instead of just immediately jumping to a consequence every time somebody does something wrong.
So I know we talked about like if the if a teacher was being racist.
Mhm.
What if it was like a kid that was being racist? Like, what would you do then?
So number one, there's going to be consequences in that situation.
Yeah.
If they're making racist remarks within the school building. But also I think in situations like that, some education needs to take place, okay? You can only see something happen so many times and think to yourself that a kid should know better until you get to a point where you feel that it's obvious that they don't know better, okay? And that's where I feel like the education piece needs to come into play, okay? Educating the student why that remark is racist, what it might actually mean to somebody who's being addressed by that remark, and helping them understand why it's not acceptable instead of just saying that it's not acceptable, right?
And what if they continue even after that?
Escalating punishment, right, or consequences, okay? And if they continue, then it becomes harassment and it becomes bullying, and eventually a student could be expelled if they are targeting a certain individual, right?
If you saw someone being judged based on their religion or race, like what would be the first thing you would do?
I think kind of just along the same lines of what I talked about, making sure that we're educating our students about why that's not acceptable. And, sometimes it helps to put that person in the other person's shoes to help them relate to what's going on. So, something along the lines of, how would you feel if someone judged you because you wear glasses or because, you wear tennis shoes every day instead of wearing dress shoes, or, you know what I mean? So things along those lines. Helping to educate individuals and help them relate to the situation based on a personal trait about them and how they would feel in that situation.
How would you react to a death-like situation that you have witnessed?
Well, luckily I've never had to experience something like that, but I would assume that I would be pretty traumatized by the event, especially if it was one of our students. You don't go into education, you don't go into the career of being a teacher or being an administrator if you don't really care about kids and what happens to them, right? So I care very deeply about all the students that walk through the doors of whatever building I'm in, and if I experienced one of them passing, I would be pretty devastated. So my guess is that I would need somebody to talk to in a situation like that so that I could deal with that trauma.
If a kid came to you as a safety person and dumped a lot of trauma on you, how would you cope with the trauma they told you?
I think it's important in that situation, first and foremost, to listen. Okay? Listen to what they're telling you. Not everybody that comes to you with problems wants you to solve them, right? I don't know if any of you have ever been in a situation like that before, but sometimes you just want somebody to listen. You want to be heard. Okay? So I'd start there. And then if I felt like they were in need of more support, I'd connect them to whatever resource they need, whether that's a counselor within this building or somebody outside of this building that I feel could help them.
I think this is the last question, but
Okay.
If there was any specific training that you had to go through before becoming an administrator to work with kids, what did you do?
Yeah, so I had quite a bit of training that I had to go through. In order to be an administrator, you have to get a separate master's degree. So that entailed me taking 10 classes through ISU that were 3 credit hours each, so it was 30 semester hours. And then after that, I had to do an internship. It was almost a 1.5 year experience. It started over the summer and then went through an entire school year. And it's competency based, so they have a bunch of projects basically that you need to complete dealing with different aspects of the job and things that you may experience. Interestingly enough, though, dealing with trauma, things of that nature, are not a huge part of that. And I think they need to be, because mental health is becoming a bigger and bigger issue, not only in our country, but within our schools for younger people. I mean, all of you experienced something that I never had to experience growing up, and that was the pandemic and being stuck at home and having to learn online, and that's difficult in itself, okay? A lot of us see home as this safe place where we can go and we're comfortable in our own skin and we have people that care about us, but that's not the same for everybody. So for some kids, being stuck at home is honestly their worst nightmare, because it's a place that they like to escape. And sometimes coming to school is that safe place for them, because there are caring adults here, who care about what happens to you guys, and you may not have that at home. So that's something I feel like is a further need for people getting into a position like I'm in, but there is a lot of training that they do have to go through to get to where I'm at. So, do you have any other questions for me?
No,
Anything that you've been thinking about while you're going through this, or based on something that I said? No?
Not really.
Okay.
Well, kind of.
Okay, go ahead.
So, about the administrator thing,
Yeah.
like if an administrator was being racist, then you'd eventually have to let them go.
Yeah, or a teacher, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And there's always somebody that oversees somebody else. So, if I'm an assistant principal, I'm working alongside the principal. So kind of like chain of command wise, right? You got assistant principal, then principal, and then you're going to have superintendent. And then you may think like, okay, well, who's in charge of the superintendent? Well, that's where your board of education comes into play, okay? And the board of education can decide to remove somebody at any point if they feel like there's just cause. And if they're acting in a racist manner, I would say that'd prove just cause. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that answer your question, or I'm sorry, I kind of cut you off there and went on a tangent. So.
Yeah. Well, it kind of does. My question was something along the lines of like, what if there was a teacher who was being racist, but like a teacher, whatever administrator who was being racist, but like the principal or like superintendent, they wouldn't do anything about it because they just don't care about it.
Yeah, I think that's where you need to go to the board of education, get them involved. Okay,
Yeah.
or maybe even get the community involved, because the board of education serves the community, serves the public, right? And they have a board meeting each month where individuals from the community get a chance to voice whatever concerns that they might have. So that's a forum where they could bring those things if they feel like it's an issue.
Anyone else have any questions?
Why did you become an administrator?
So I was a high school teacher for 13 years first. I was a biology teacher. I loved it. But at the same time, I was teaching at Normal Community High School, so our class periods were 49 minutes apiece. So if you came into my classroom, I saw you for 49 minutes every day. That was it, right? I saw a lot of kids dealing with a lot of things, okay? Some of the trauma that we've talked about here, whether it's problems at home or, dealing with somebody who's hurting them, or they don't have enough food at home, or whatever the case may be. And in some of those situations, I felt helpless. Like I wanted to help, but I just didn't have the resources, and I wasn't in a position where I felt like I could affect real change to help those people. Okay, I wasn't a decision maker, right? I was a classroom teacher. I was being told what to do instead of helping make decisions to make things better. And it got to a point where I just felt like I could do more if I was in a position where I was a decision maker. So that's why I decided to become an administrator. You know, you get to a certain point where you can either just keep complaining about decisions that were being made, or you can do something about it. And doing something about it for me was getting my degree so that I could be in one of those positions to do more, to help kids more. So
How does it feel to like be one of the top people of the school? Like, how does it feel to have control over?
it's a lot of responsibility. Sometimes it can be overwhelming, but it feels good to know that you can have a positive effect on the culture of the school and how kids feel when they're entering the building. If kids are coming to school, and for the most part, I'm going to say for the most part, because I know some of us aren't going to like school no matter what happens, right? But if kids, for the most part, enjoy coming to the school that I'm working at, then I know I'm doing my job. So.
Now, okay, I was thinking about what we were talking about. I actually got another question, if you're okay.
Sure,
with
yeah,
it.
go ahead.
Okay, so let's say that like a kid, like their parents had taught them something that's not like true or like bad, like racism or something, or like homophobia or something like that. What if you like tried to explain that to him now, but like they just wouldn't listen because their parents kept saying, "Hey, this is right, that's wrong," but it's really the other way around.
Well, obviously I can't control what they're being taught at home and what parents are teaching their kids. But regardless of what that student believes and whether they're willing to listen to me and change those points of view or not, there are still going to be rules here, right? So regardless of whether you agree or disagree, you're expected to follow them. And if you don't, there's going to be consequences. That's just the way things are, right? You may think to yourself, well, I don't agree with the fact that we're not allowed to wear hats. Okay, that's fine. You're allowed to have that point of view, right? But when you come to the building, the expectation is still going to be the same whether you believe it or not. You gotta follow the rules. Make sense?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why is there no hat rule?
Why is there no hat rule? You know, as far as go ahead. Yeah. As far as that's concerned, my personal point of view is that I don't think they're a distraction. But at some point or another, people felt that wearing something on your head was a distraction, and it was also seen as a sign of respect that when you entered a building, you took off your hat. Does that make sense? And so I think it's something that's just kind of persisted throughout time culturally. But that I can tell you, as far as like our student handbook is concerned and our code of conduct and expected behaviors, that's something that we examine every year. And I know that it's a topic of discussion that's being talked about right now because the handbook committee just started meeting.
So does that mean like our policies can change too?
Yeah, absolutely. Similar to our laws, right, in our country. Laws can change, okay? You gotta have support from the individuals who are enforcing that, right? So, if we're talking about our student handbook and policies that we have in there, it's not just gonna be, well, Mrs. Hicklin is the principal, so what she says goes, right? You're gonna have a committee that's composed of teachers and administrators and maybe your guidance counselors and whoever else is part of the decision-making team within your building. They will gather and they will discuss these things. And some people may have reasons for why they feel like it shouldn't happen, and others will have reasons that feel like we should have that rule. And there will be a discussion around it, and then basically we take a vote, and the majority will decide what's actually put in and what's taken out of the handbook, what rules go in there. That make sense?
I have a question also.
Yeah.
So, what has been one of the hardest things you've had to go through as a school administrator?
Well, threats, like similar to the one that's being described in here. Maybe not necessarily a bomb threat, but whenever we feel that maybe somebody may have brought a weapon, or we're told that somebody did, or something of that nature, it's a scary situation. I'd be lying to you if I said that it wasn't. Okay? Because immediately you become fearful for everybody involved, right? Somebody may have a weapon here at school, and we have to investigate that threat, knowing that we might be putting ourselves in danger doing it. Okay? But our greater responsibility outside of keeping ourselves safe is keeping all of you safe, because when you walk into our building, we're essentially in place of your parents, right? It's our job to keep you safe. That's our number one responsibility when you come into our building, is for us to keep you safe. So those are scary situations. And when I was a classroom teacher at Normal Community, a kid brought a gun to school. And he took several students hostage in his classroom. And when he turned his back on the teacher tackled him and wrestled the gun away from him. So nobody was hurt. But it was very traumatizing for everybody, because we had to lock down in our classrooms, and then we had to be let out by police officers, and everybody had to be dismissed to their parents from the nearby church where we were at. Okay? And that is something that I've been put in charge of this year, being new to the district, is to look at all of our safety policies and make sure that we have things in place if situations like that were to happen. So if we have to evacuate, where do we go? Where do we take everybody? Okay? What does that procedure look like to get you back to your parents? And we'll be practicing that in the spring when it gets a little nicer out. We'll evacuate, we'll walk down to the church, everyone will know, hey, here's where we go if we have to leave the school for some reason. And it may not be somebody bringing a gun, but if we had a gas leak here, you don't want to stay in the school, right? It's dangerous. So we would have to go somewhere else so that your parents could pick you up and they could get you home. So things like that.
If there was like an actual evacuation, if we lived like close to the church, could we just go straight to our house?
If there is a situation where somebody brings a gun to school and we're on lockdown and you guys are escaping the school, you go wherever you feel like you need to go to get yourself safe. Okay? But in that situation, we want to know that you're safe. So at some point, you're going to have to get word to somebody here, hey, I'm okay, I ran home, etc. Whether that's your teacher or calling the office or whatever the case may be. Does that make sense? But yeah, you get yourself safe. You go where you need to go to be safe. Hide, run, anything of that nature. Okay? Any other questions? Okay, I hope you learned something. All right.